What led to the Russian invasion of Ukraine? To understand the current situation, we must delve into the historical context. Let's rewind the clock to the 9th century, when the shared history of Russia and Ukraine began. The Kievan Rus, a federation of Slavic tribes under a Varangian dynasty, was the cultural and historical seed from which both nations sprouted. But this shared genesis was disrupted by the Mongol invasion in the 13th century, fragmenting the region into various principalities. Fast forward to the 16th century. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth controlled vast territories, including large parts of what is now Ukraine. But the tug of war for this land didn't end there. The Russian Empire, rising in power and influence, gradually absorbed these territories in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. The 20th century saw Ukraine becoming a vital cog in the machinery of the Soviet Union. As one of the most prominent republics, it was a significant contributor to the Soviet economy and a crucial player in the political landscape. Then in December 1991, a turning point. A referendum saw over 90% of voters in Ukraine favoring independence from the USSR. This was a defining moment in Ukraine's history, signaling a clear desire for self-rule and sovereignty. It also marked the beginning of a new chapter in Ukraine-Russia relations, one that would be fraught with tension and disagreements. The dissolution of the Soviet Union shortly after the referendum left a power void and a tangle of unresolved issues. It also sparked a struggle for influence in this vast region, with Russia and the West vying for sway over the newly independent nations. Ukraine, straddling the East and the West, found itself at the center of this geopolitical tug-of-war. This historical backdrop sets the stage for the current conflict, as the two nations have divergent views on their shared history and Ukraine's rightful place in the region. The political and strategic interests of Russia and Ukraine have been a major factor in the ongoing conflict. A significant point of contention lies in Russia's concerns about the expansion of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in Eastern Europe. Russia sees the potential for Ukraine to join this military alliance as a direct threat to its own security. This is largely due to NATO's principle of collective defense, which dictates that an attack against one member is considered an attack against all. Russia fears that a NATO-aligned Ukraine could lead to foreign military bases right on its doorstep. On the other hand, Ukraine has a deep-seated desire to assert its sovereignty and choose its own alliances. It wishes to foster stronger ties with the West and continue down the path of democratization, further distancing itself from Russia's sphere of influence. Adding fuel to the fire, Russian President Vladimir Putin has made serious accusations against the Ukrainian government. Without providing concrete evidence, Putin claims that there is a genocide being committed against ethnic Russians living in the separatist regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. He has used this as a justification for the invasion, stating that the aim is to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. This statement has raised eyebrows worldwide, with many critics arguing that it serves as a thinly veiled pretext for the possible overthrow of the current Ukrainian government. These divergent interests and ideologies have created a powder keg of tension between the two nations. Russia's desire for security and influence clashes head-on with Ukraine's aspiration for sovereignty and alignment with the West. This clash has ultimately ignited the flames of conflict, leading us to the dire situation we are witnessing today. These conflicting interests and ideologies have escalated tensions between the two nations, leading to the current situation. The Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 has had far-reaching implications, not just for the two nations involved, but for the entire globe. Let's delve into the immediate impacts of the invasion, which have reverberated across the world, affecting several sectors. One of the immediate effects was the closure of airspaces. Ukraine, Moldova, and part of Belarus shut down their airspaces, disrupting international air travel. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency issued security alerts due to fears of missile threats. On the other side of the Atlantic, the US expanded its no-fly zone around Ukraine, Belarus, and Western Russia. This has led to airlines rerouting flights and suspending services to affected regions. The aviation industry has been hit hard. Major airlines like Delta and American suspended cooperation with Russian airlines. European countries like Poland and the United Kingdom closed their airspace to Russian carriers. The European Union went a step further, banning the export of aircraft and spare parts to Russia. These actions have led to fluctuating share prices and potential fare increases, underscoring the global economic impacts of the invasion. But the consequences go beyond economics. A humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Ukraine. Thousands have been displaced from their homes, fleeing the violence and uncertainty. Everyday life has been upended, with people living in constant fear and anxiety. The world watches as the conflict unfolds, prompting an outpouring of international aid and support. The invasion has not only escalated the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but it has also sent shockwaves around the world, affecting various sectors and sparking a humanitarian crisis. The world continues to grapple with the repercussions of this conflict, and the hope for a peaceful resolution remains, even as the reality on the ground grows increasingly dire. So, what is the truth behind the Russian invasion of Ukraine? It's a complex issue, rooted in a tangled web of historical grievances, geopolitical ambitions, and ideological clashes. Let's summarize the key points we've discussed. The historical backdrop of this conflict is deeply rooted in the shared yet divergent histories of Russia and Ukraine. The political and strategic interests at play here involve Russia's concerns about NATO expansion and Ukraine's desire for sovereignty and self-determination. The invasion itself has had far-reaching impacts, not just on Ukraine but also on the entire globe, with repercussions felt in international air travel, political alliances, and economic sectors. All these elements intertwine to paint a complex and nuanced picture of the situation. But let's not forget the human element, the lives disrupted and the peace shattered, the resilience of the Ukrainians and their struggle for autonomy and freedom, the international community's response and the ongoing diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis. This is not just a story of two countries at odds, but a global narrative of power, resilience, and the quest for peace. As the world watches the unfolding events, the hope for a peaceful resolution remains, even as the reality on the ground grows increasingly dire.